Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live recording of the Young Screenwriters podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about script contests. So, how to get the most out of them, which ones to enter, what to do, and we are going to get into it in a minute when we start our live recording. But for now, just kind of hanging out with you for the next few minutes. How are you, Adam? How are you doing
I'm doing
today?
fantastic. Alexie, how are you?
I am pretty good. I've been reading a lot about contests and kind of like anticipation of this, and it always makes me excited. Like I'm just like, yeah, enter them all.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
exciting to play the game for some people, Um, I
Jim
don't,
says,
yes,
did
Jim,
Adam get
I
a
did get a
haircut?
haircut. I decided to part it on the other side of my head. I've been going that way for 4 years, and then I was like, no, actually, oh, yeah, sorry, other way. I was going this way, and now I'm going that way. So
Wow. And no glasses today too, so that's the
no, I'm
other.
also I had like a year worth of contacts that was just sitting in my bathroom, so I've decided to start using them. But they make my eyes very irritated. So if I look tired, it's that. Um,
Actually, supremely well rested. It's just these new contacts.
and Preston, yes, I'm seeing it in IMAX next week. Dune 2, excited.
I don't know if Carl and I, yeah, we need to go see Dune. I was seeing you and Avi talk about your opinions of it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing that's happening. Um, but
Apparently, it's better than the first one, but then that's not surprising because it's all the payoff of the
that's
book.
true.
It's the second half of the book.
And isn't Zendaya more in it? So
I mean, she's in
yeah,
it.
yeah. So I mean, she was
We,
she was in the last one for like 0.2 seconds,
yeah, but you meet her
and
halfway through the book, so it's like
yeah,
right when
yeah.
he meets her is when the movie ends in the first one.
So naturally, it's gonna be better because she's there. Is my opinion.
Yeah,
But
if you like her, then she's in it.
yep.
Florence Pugh is also in it,
Oh
um,
shoot, I love
and
her.
Anya Taylor Joy,
Love her. God.
and Austin Butler, who is going to be great. They've got a bunch of people. Christopher Walken's also in it.
The poppin' cast.
Yeah,
Absolutely poppin'. Cool. Well, we think that we are about good to go for our live recording. So let's talk about some script contests.
great. You kick us off.
All right, let's do it. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Young Screenwriters podcast, where we share ideas, insight, and advice about screenwriting and film. Today, we are going to be talking about script contests, what to look out for, how to increase your chances of success, and basically what you need to know. I'm joined today by Adam.
Hello.
And let's get into it. So I guess to kind of start, script contests are a great way for people who are brand new to the industry to kind of get their foot in the door. I think that's a big part of the appeal of these things is, you generally can't go to a writing board and just apply to like Warner Brothers to write a feature film, but you can go to a script contest and cold enter Austin Film Festival or something like that. I guess to begin, Adam, what do you see as kind of like the benefits of script contests, of script competitions?
Yeah. So I think immediately, if you're starting out screenwriting, let's just say you have your first or second script and you're kind of stuck with the situation where you're like, I don't know what to do with this. I know nobody. How do I make movies from, my word processor, like if you know nobody and you have no connections and nobody accepts unsolicited materials, the first step is, well, you need to have your script be solicited. How do you get your script to be solicited? You get representation. How do you get representation if you don't know anyone, right? this is where kind of scripts can be a stepping stone towards getting industry reads, getting from producers or production companies, and potential representation. Um, I think, not all screenplay competitions are created equal, as you know, Lexi. I mean, but
Yeah.
the first thing I would say is, if you were thinking about, sort of dipping your toes into screenwriting competitions, is to be very clear about like what they are, what your expectations are, and what you can get out of it. And I think the number one thing you can get is exposure, and networking opportunities with people who make films and are looking for talent. And best example of this is, the biggest and most prestigious screenwriting competition is the Nichols. Um, if you get into even the semifinals or quarterfinals of that competition, your script is going to get read requests, possibly.
Yeah.
Like all people will have is the log line and what it is, but like if it places well, there's going to be energy. And if you get, especially if you're a finalist, producers are just going to be, out of sheer curiosity, going to be like, hey, can I read that? And that could be a step towards getting your thing made. I know all this stuff. What do you about you, Alexi?
Yeah, no. So I think it's also worth saying that our friend Avi, who people have known uh from this podcast and the live streams, he did well in Nichols. I think what he at least made semifinals. I think he was a finalist in Nichols. And he got a ton of traction. He was getting inundated with read requests, and it was a really helpful thing for him in trying to actually package a script that he was writing. And then just in my personal experience, I submitted a sci-fi script to Austin and made it to semifinals with that, and was also getting more traction. And there's some benefits of Austin as well, like where you get to get a discount to go to their festival and meet people, and people want to talk to you if you're a semifinalist or above. And it was a lot of fun. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that two of the main things that really come from a lot of these contests are exposure and networking opportunities. But, you know, something you and I discussed a little bit before this, Adam, is that, contests kind of break into two categories, right? Like where there's some that are more like exposure and networking based, and some that are really, really about the prizes.
Yes.
And sometimes the prizes are often monetary. The prizes are often also connected to things like your like exposure. A common contest prize that you'll win is that your log line gets put in a book or something that they send out to a bunch of contacts so that people can get back to you. But sometimes it's just cash prizes. Sometimes it's that your stuff will get produced. There's a lot of stuff out there.
Sometimes it's a mentorship, like a fellowship.
Yeah.
Uh, Sundance, for example, the prize you get from that competition is to be a part of their lab and to have that experience.
Yeah.
So, like, I think kind of goes back to what we were saying, where like when you're looking at like the contest landscape, consider where you are and what your script is, and then what your expectations are, right? Like, I mean, because the biggest expectation you should have is nothing, because projects are really subjective. You could have a
Yeah.
script, and I know loads of people who've had this experience where a script do really well in one contest and do absolutely nothing in another one, right? There's very
Yep.
little assurances. You don't know who these readers are. You don't know how high quality they are, especially, the really big competition. I mean, the small ones, you have no idea, but even the really big ones, you don't know how it's going to go. You might, like, somebody might just read the first 15, 30 pages of your thing and be like, yeah, whatever. And somebody else might give a really deep, thoughtful read. Um,
Mhm.
Inconsistent. And so you should also consider the monetary aspect of this, right? If
Yeah.
money is no object, you can apply for everything. But if money is not if money is an object, be very intentional about, like, okay, I really believe in this script. I think it would do really well for X, Y, and Z. I'm going to submit for the Nichols and Austin this year, but like, that's not necessarily going for a bunch of them for the prizes, right? Because you could just waste a lot of money, and don't recommend that for people.
Yep. Typically, in order to enter a script contest, most script contests, I would say, range from $50 to $100 to submit a feature film. Sometimes you can get in on like an early bird thing to catch it at the lower end. Like I think Austin right now is closer to the $50 side if you do early bird, but as time goes on, that price goes up pretty significantly, getting to closer to $100. I think that is definitely something to consider, is that, you know, most of these contests aren't free. Is a free good one that I want to talk about later, but most of them aren't free. So you really have to pick and choose kind of which ones you think you have the best chance at. And so let's imagine that we're somebody who is thinking about entering a screenwriting contest. One question that we have from Preston is it good to have a few solid scripts before entering a competition in case you get noticed? So basically, like, you know, if you're going to go to pitch meetings, we tend to say that before you go to these pitch meetings, you want to have several scripts so that if they don't love the thing that you're pitching right then, but they like you have other things to tell them. And is that the same case with competitions? So before you apply, checking everything to make sure you're ready to apply. Adam, do you think that you need more than one script to enter?
I think it depends on who you are and what you're doing, right? Like if you're just screenwriter, or if you are just pushing that aspect of your career and you want to, like, you know, have stuff produced traditionally, I would say, yeah, of course. But if you are also making films and you're producing short films, if you're making web content, if you're like writing for different mediums, at least have two, you know, I mean, like, but at the end of the day, you lose nothing by placing well with one script, right? And you never know what that's going to be. Your first script could do better than your third script, even if the third script's better. Like that's kind of the rhyme. There's no rhyme and reason to this, because the reading experience for all of these is subjective. That being said, Nichols has better readers probably than some smaller festivals. But you know, it depends on where you are and what your expectations are. If money is tight, I would focus on your craft. I really think, you know, get good at feel comfortable with it. You know, I mean, don't rush into it is my question, is my main thing. But if you have the money, do it.
Yeah, my gut instinct in terms of how many scripts you need done in order to apply is honestly one. Because you're going to submit it and then it's going to be probably several weeks, if not months, before you hear back. So
right.
If you finish one script that you feel good about, this isn't the same thing as a pitch meeting. Just submit it. It's just a way to make things happen. If you feel that script is good to go for now, you're never going to feel like the script is 100% done forever and ever and perfect. But if you feel like it's good enough that it represents your intentions with it, then submit it. And once you submit it, try your best to forget about it and just move on to the next thing, right? That would be my personal advice. Is I don't think you need, like, I don't think it's the same thing as going to writers meetings in LA or anything like that, like where you need a whole portfolio. You just need one solid script, submit it and forget it. And something that's said about contests that I think is extremely true is good scripts lose all the time. Losing does not mean that your script was bad. The only scripts that win are good scripts in general, for the most part. So like most of the time, well, they're at least solid. It would be it would be like pretty screwy if it was bad. So like if you,
again, it's subjective though, right? Like you could like
it doesn't mean it was the best script. Yeah. It doesn't mean that the script that won was actually the best script out of everything that was sent to them, but the winners tend to be solid scripts. Like if you do well, feel good about what you did. That is a good thing. It means people liked your script and you probably have something solid enough. But if you lose, it is not a reflection on like it does not mean your script is bad.
Right. Like,
So
I don't think a horror film has ever won Nichols, ever.
no, and
Right,
that
but even if they
yeah,
placed, right?
yeah.
So there's a political component to this too, especially with the big ones, where
Well, yeah,
genre scripts tend to do worse, or have historically done worse than dramas
in
in
Nichols.
certain
Yeah,
competitions that are like more quote unquote serious.
yeah,
And then there are some competitions like Slam Dance, where it's about being like, the scripts that do well are unorthodox and not necessarily commercial
yeah,
overtly, right? So it really depends on your expectations about like, where is this, you know?
yeah,
And so never feel bad about not winning, because I've read it was 2 years ago. I read a bunch of the Nichols scripts, and the one that won, the top scripts were not as good for me as some of the ones that were in the semifinals, um,
yeah.
just on a
But
personal
they,
level.
but yeah, but it's because I mean, it's so okay, to kind of put a bracket on that first section. When you have a script that you think represents your intentions well enough, submit it, right? And then now let's talk about choosing stuff to submit to. How do you choose which contests to actually go for this script, especially assuming that you don't just have buckets of cash and you can't just blast it to all of them. So I would say that you're looking to submit. Something to think about is it's actually kind of practice for if you were submitting it to a producer. Look at past winners. Just like if you were submitting it to a producer, you would look at their production company and the kind of stuff they make and make sure that what you're sending to them is in line with what they actually make. Look at these contests, look at past winners, and see if your script it all fits that vibe, right? I mean, Adam, do you have anything to kind
Yeah.
of speak to about that?
The best thing about that advice is that you're reading other scripts that are not produced, right? And
Yeah,
everybody should be reading their competition. You should be reading the scripts that are doing well. You should be reading the scripts that producers are excited about. You should be reading the blacklist scripts, or at least some of them every year. You should be connected to, because there's a whole aspect of like, speculative material, highly subjective. Everything's subjective, obviously, but speculative material that's like, original is very, very hard to produce right now. So the stuff that is cutting through, that is getting reads, you should be reading what is getting people's attention, just for
yeah,
your own education. Be like, wow, okay. Now, some of that, again, like the blacklist, is also political, where you have people who do campaigns and leverage their contacts, and people who have ins and relationships and are pushing their scripts, and they're leveraging their personal networks that they have to get on those lists. That's definitely something that happens, but still the script has to be good enough to do that, or at least interesting
yeah.
or noteworthy enough. Like, read what's getting attention, and that's what's important.
No, for sure. And I think the blacklist scripts, for example, always end up circulating right after that list comes out. So
Mhm.
those are available. You can almost always get them on Reddit, like basically immediately on the screenwriting subreddit. It's great to read the kinds of things that are kind of floating to the top, and then to even be pickier. Like read the log lines for what made it to finals at Nichols. You're going to notice trends with the kinds of things that people want for Nichols. You're going to notice like a trend towards like the prestige dramas, if for Nichols, for example. You're going to notice like that Nichols doesn't have as many horrors that actually make it all the way to the top. You're going to notice these things. And it can be helpful to make sure that you're spending your money in the right direction. So that's kind of like picking the right contest for you. But I think that there's also something to say about just making sure that the contest is a legitimate one to enter in the first place.
Yeah,
Like,
and just to list some of the biggest competitions that I think are always worth a send
yeah,
if you have a script you really believe in. There's the Nichols, Austin Film Festival, Sundance Screenwriters Lab, if you want to have that type of experience, which you probably do if you're starting out. Page, I think, is really good.
hmm,
Um, Final Draft has a good competition. I've heard good things about. Slam Dance is really good. Screencraft is legit. But like, anything. Most there are so many scripts, there's so many contests that are like in the B tier, where it's sort of like, oh, it has a great prize, and they say they give you exposure, but do they really? Austin and Nichols are really famous and well regarded and have credibility. The reason why they get exposure is because producers seek out the scripts
Yeah.
there because they're famous, right? And that's just kind of a reality. Whether or not it's deserved or not, who knows? But
Yeah, it's one of those things where honestly, if you were going to say I want to win a specific contest, like if you got to choose which contest to win, you would probably want to choose Nichols or Austin, right? Just in terms of like everything that comes with it. That doesn't mean that they're the only ones worth applying to, but they definitely have the most prestige, at least right out of the gate. So there's a lot of contests that you can look at to kind of like to get the lay of the land and like to try to say like, okay, these ones are more reliable, more known, more established. People have been entering these for years and have been doing interesting things. What if you're looking at contests that aren't particularly known yet, that might be newer to the scene? How do you evaluate if that is a good contest to enter? I'd For me, I'd say one of the first things you want to look at is the prizes. Is it worth it? Is it worth your time at all if you win? Sometimes these contests have like a really cool promise, like they seem like they're about something you're interested in, they're run by cool people, but then you read the prizes and it's like a subscription to their software and for like for like half a year or something silly, and it's like no. So I would say one of the first steps is look at the prizes and make sure that you're not wasting your time examining it further. Right.
definitely.
Something else to kind of look at is who's running it and what are their intentions here. Like why I always ask, why is this person running a contest and giving away these prizes?
Right.
And the answer for Austin Film Festival, for example, is that they're running this contest because I mean they have a whole film festival where they make all their money doing film festival things, right? So that's their whole business. So it makes sense that they would want to have this contest that elevates people. But you know, for sometimes for these smaller contests, it's like, okay, what's really your intention here? Are you just kind of
Yeah.
trying to get people to pay an admission fee? Like what's
Or
on?
like, are you pay? Is it really just a way to get paid coverage or paid feedback? Right. Like, there's
Yeah,
so many of these script services that you should be skeptical of because, like, okay, who are you getting coverage from? You know,
yeah,
like that's one of the problems with blacklists. Is like who is giving you an 8 really?
yeah,
Who is giving you a 6? What does that even mean from them? Like and like because that is a prize in a way. Like you're paying for a service. So like there's a lot of these screenwriting institutions offer services, right? The vast majority of them, you should be skeptical of. And
mhm,
same with small competitions that are new. You should be skeptical and you should do your research, right? If it's free, hey, it's free.
yeah,
That's a thing. I will say that's the biggest green flag for a new competition that you haven't heard of is if it's free and it balances the fact or very affordable, because a lot of these scripts competitions that have evolved over the last 15-20 years are extraordinarily predatory and like they just were set up to collect to collect money.
yeah,
Film festivals too,
yeah.
honestly. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a tough game to kind of balance, right? Like where it's like which ones are legit and which ones are just trying to collect your money, and it can be hard to tell if you're a new writer who's just trying to look for something
mhm.
to break into. But yes, having the green, like the good green flag, is if it's a low cost to enter or if they're not collecting money. I will say though that means that you need to look at, okay, then what are they getting out of it? What do they get if it's not the money, right? And so recap to where we are. First step is like make sure that you actually like the prizes. The next step is look at like why they're running this competition. Who are they? What are their intentions? Third thing to look for is your rights as a writer in terms of like, what are you giving to them when you send them your script?
Yep.
Are you giving them right of first refusal on your script? Like, are you giving,
Always read
you
the small print with
always
stuff you don't
read.
trust.
Yeah, and make sure that like if you give it to them that you're allowed, like what's your obligation too. I think it's like us, I keep going back to Austin because it's just one I'm familiar with, but like if you're submitting to Austin and your script I think gets like picked up or something like that in the meantime, I believe you have an obligation to tell them and pull it out. Like it's it's important to kind of know what the expectations are for you and what you can expect of them. Um,
And also
what
research the genre and
Yeah.
style of the competition too, because a lot of these smaller competitions could be more specific to your genre. Like, for example, if you do horror, you
Yeah.
should go to horror competitions and festivals, because that's kind of possibly where you could get more energy and more connection that's meaningful, you know. And another, just this is just a random thing, personally, I would recommend not to pay for feedback if it's part of the prize. I know Austin does that too, you know, but like, because you don't know who these readers are, and
Yep.
it's not as valuable as feedback from people who you know and whose opinion you at least understand, if not trust. Feedback from a stranger, even a well-connected stranger, is usually not as valuable as you think. You know, because sometimes, you know, the readers for these competitions, they're just other writers, and other writers aren't necessarily good people to get feedback from. They can be, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I think I'm a great person to get feedback from on scripts. That's my opinion about myself, you know. But like, a random
Well,
writer or a random person, they have their biases, they have their problem. They might just not like the thing you're doing for some arbitrary reason, and then they
yeah.
just trash you. So don't pay for that unless it's free. If
I'll
they
tell
offer
you.
feedback for free, do it.
Yeah. I mean, Austin is an example of when you enter, you always get back. Actually, you might have to make it to some level, but you get back like a paragraph of feedback. And honestly, the feedback in that paragraph is not particularly helpful. Oftentimes, you'll have people that completely contradict each other when they read your script. The only thing that it's really helpful about is understanding the headspace of the person who either passed on or advanced your script. But I'll tell you an example of like paying for coverage and people being confused or like just getting odd experience back. I was doing a rewrite for this guy who wrote something I would normally never write, a horror slasher. I think I told you about that. And he submitted it for coverage to, I'll just say it, I don't care, to We Screenplay. And the first people who gave it back clearly really didn't like horror slashers. Like just did not really understand the genre. Like there was definitely things to improve in the script that was legitimate, but also you could just tell from the way that they wrote about the script that this was just not their freaking cup of tea. That they were just not somebody who wanted to be reading this script. And so he ended up submitting it again, and we got somebody who clearly did understand it and had much more favorable things to say from the point of view of somebody who actually likes these horror slashers. But then, you know, the more to your point, Adam, about like these are just other writers, like who they don't necessarily know more than you do. The writer on this script with me is a producer that's producing stuff all day long, whole career. He knows his stuff. He already knows how much money it would take to make this movie because he's been talking to people about making it and has locked in the budget and is already pretty advanced. He got back the feedback from We Screenplay from the person who was much more favorable, and one of their downside notes was you could never produce this for under like this much money. And he's like, this guy isn't a producer, clearly. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So, I mean, that was kind of a long-winded example, but it's just to say that when you're getting coverage or notes from people where you don't know the name of the person who's going to be giving you notes before you submit, it's always going to kind of be luck of the draw. And that's the case for a lot of these places that give.
It's actually the case for every reader who will ever read your script
Yeah,
in a
that's true
competition,
too. Yeah.
which is why the first thing you should do is temper your expectations. Like, expect absolutely nothing to happen. And you should not unless it's like the big two, you should not submit to these unless you're financially comfortable doing so. And in if unless you're okay with totally nothing happening, even
Yes.
if the script is incredible, because it's a crapshoot. I've just, you don't know who your preliminary readers are going to be. And also, especially in stuff like Nichols, they have different readers at different stages, right? The people who are reading the finalists are not the same people necessarily who are
Hmm.
reading the glut of the thousands of initial scripts,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
there's a just temper your expectations because you don't know who your readers are. And
Yeah.
I
And
have actually for
been a
my
reader. Yeah.
college, I for because there was a screenwriting competition that I did well in, and for my alumni network, um and I was a reader for that, but that was a very small competition where there was like only 150 scripts. um
I I was a reader for a smaller competition called the Screenwriters Colony when I was in college. And that was really fun and I really enjoyed it. And then when you do well in Austin, I guess you have to make it to semifinals or something like that. They come back and they ask you to read for them later. So a lot of time, so at least for Austin, I don't know that it's 100% of the people that they've sourced to be readers, but a lot of the readers are people who have just placed well in the contest before, which could create kind of a cycle of the same stuff getting elevated. But anyway, they came to me and they asked me to read and I started doing it. But to be honest with you, the benefits of reading were pretty pitiful. So I didn't end up doing it. It was like if you read like a script, you get 1 point. And if you get 50 points, then you get a 10% discount on their like festival tickets. And it
that's
was just
horrible.
it was really, really bad. Granted, this was in like 2018 or something like that. So maybe they've improved their system. But at the time I was like, this is terrible. I really don't want to. I can't do all this for nothing. Um,
And the
but
most
it was
valuable readers are people who have stuff to do other than read for nothing,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Like, so the people who are reading in a lot of these are not high value readers. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean, and like, like, if you do well, don't take that as like a notch against you. Take the
no.
wins, but
But it's like people can read and tell if a script is really good fast,
mhm,
but especially for scripts that might not have like the strongest hook or something like that, or like be like the easiest to understand for somebody who's skimming, your
yeah.
script might get overlooked.
That's why
Um,
your first, this is really why, you have to make your script skim proof.
yeah,
And that's impossible to a certain level, but like skim resistant. This is why the first page is so important. This is why the first 5 pages are so important. And it's why you have to really, really, really get structure down to do
yeah,
well in competitions. And for like speculative first time sales as well. Not necessarily because, it's objectively better, although I do believe in strict clean structure and all that stuff, but because n- nobody's going to trust you, period. And you have
yeah,
to earn their trust by showing them that you know what you're doing. And that means you probably can't, as a first time screenwriter, do brave stuff with structure or like
yeah.
innovation or innovate or be like that way. You have to earn people's trust and you have to show them that you know what you're doing, and kind of as a craftsperson show them that you understand how screenplay should be. Again, I don't want to say you have to be conservative in your
Well,
screenwriting.
I'll tell you one example for The Quiet Place. If you read the spec script
Mm,
of A Quiet Place, it ended up being rewritten by what's his
John
name,
Krasinski.
John Krasinski, in order to become the version that they had. But the original script was a spec script, if I'm not mistaken, and it did a lot of really weird stuff with formatting that was really evocative and interesting, like putting like one word per page to slow down your reading as you were like building towards something suspenseful. But the way that they approached it was very, very smart as a spec script, which was that the script started more traditional and normal and steadily got weirder in its formatting as time went on. Like it it still kind of broke some rules in the beginning, but it definitely got weirder, if I'm not mistaken, as time went on after you had already been kind of hooked into the story and trusted them. So it set the tone in the beginning, gained your trust, and then started messing with it later. And I think that that's a kind of a good format. So this actually brings us to the part of this conversation that I really wanted to have, which is how to increase your chances of success. And I think that, Adam, what you just said was like making your script skim proof, really focusing on readability and really focusing on those first couple of pages. What's like your general advice for somebody who is entering a contest? How do you have success in the contest?
I mean, like I said, you really cannot control
Yeah.
any of that because you don't know who your readers are, but you can make sure that you are hitting your big. If you Here are some general things, and I think it's just good for speculative screenwriting in general. Page one, we know who the protagonist is and what's wrong with their life in like a very visceral, immediate way. Or page one, we understand the idea of this movie.
Yeah.
One of those two things, or both of those. And by page five, page 10, inciting incident happens extremely clearly. By
Yeah.
page, and I know I'm being arbitrary with like numbers here because I don't really even believe that for like great storytelling or whatever.
But for
But
contests,
for
when you have
contests,
yeah.
it just has to be really clear what the movie is, how it starts. Like answering the audience questions that are really obvious, like who is this about and why should I care, and what happens that makes me want to know what happens next, right? Like,
Mhm.
and from there, obviously, I think having really clear act breaks at the end of act one, something really clear should happen energy shift wise, where the character goes after the thing they want, the objective in the story. Midpoint should have a huge energy shift where things change, the tactics to get the thing they want should change. And then going into act three, there should be another huge energy shift where the character is forced to change emotionally or has to learn something fundamental to their worldview in order to resolve the story and conflict. And an ending feels that an ending where the characters get what they need and not necessarily what they want, or the world gets what it needs and not necessarily what it wants, right? Like those are all like really big picture things that I think are just true for stories in general, but especially in this if you're imagining people are skimming and
Yeah.
they're resenting the fact that they have to do this because the average screenwriting reader doesn't want to read a screenplay. Even producers, agents, they'd rather not have the pile of scripts in their inbox that they have
Yeah.
to go through. They're like, okay, let me read it. What's this about? Okay, okay, yeah. You've got a huge barrier of inertia that you have to overcome, and there's just not enough. There's not room to mess around. You have to like nail the fundamentals and really get through about who this character is and what's wrong with them in a very visceral, clean level, or what is the idea of this and why is it awesome? Like
Yeah.
first 2 to 3 pages, like hit us with it. What about you, Alexi?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that in it, I agree with all of that. And then in addition to that, there's some like basic formatting stuff to just kind of keep
Yes.
in mind to make sure that first off, just make sure it's in correct screenplay format. There's no like Chicago manual of style for screenwriting, but there is expectations like, written in
People have
Courier
tried
and
though. People have
yeah,
tried.
they have tried and they have failed. But yeah, so it's like just make sure that it looks like a script. And then my personal advice is also to formatting wise, I don't care if this is controversial, bold your scene headings because it makes it easier to skim. It gives a little treat for the reader to see that, like, oh, if I just get through this, the next scene is right there. It tricks something in people's brains and makes it feel more digestible and readable to have those headlines bold. And I just think it's a better reading experience, and it's really helpful in particular when people are skimming. The other thing I will say is super embrace your white space. You don't want to have on your first page a paragraph 6 lines deep. You know, you want to try to be snappy with that scene description for people who are skimming, and at least break it up so that you have like 3 lines, then 1 line, then 2 lines, and kind of, you know, pay attention to what the white space looks like on your page and try to make it read as fast as it would appear on the screen. So that's a big tip, is make sure that it reads as fast as it should appear on the screen. If it takes longer to read than it would take on the screen, then you need to shift some things. It should be the same amount of time. And then one last piece of advice is that, which is almost painful, but when actors read scripts, a lot of times they don't read the scene description. When readers read scripts, if they're like on the 6th scripts that they're reading, they might skim the scene description and read the dialogue. Make sure your dialogue is freaking on point. That doesn't mean it has to be like overly stylized, and honestly, that would probably even be like a down thing. It doesn't mean like make every single line like a trailer dramatic moment, but it means make sure that your characters' voices are really coming through in what they say and what they do, and that you're really carefully considering your dialogue, because just realistically, that is what's going to get more reading attention than your scene description. And that's actually not something that we've really talked about much, but I think it's just kind of a reality of entering the slush pile and trying to like navigate through the slush pile, which, by the way, is the term for like the huge pile of scripts on a producer or reader's desk, is called the slush pile.
It's metaphorical now because it's all digital. But
yes.
I'll just add that I have been guilty. I have just read the dialogue in some scripts that I just want to get to know really fast. Like when I read the Blacklist scripts, I don't read them all cover to cover. I like taste them to see. Now, if something really captivates me,
in the dialogue, usually.
We're not just in the dialogue, but I always read the first 2 pages of not every year, but I try to read the first 2 pages of all these. And if I'm hooked, I want to continue. And sometimes it's like, and this is just my personal reading pleasure, so I'm not like obligated. If I'm in this competition, or if I have somebody's paid for me to give them coverage or something, I will read the whole script.
Oh,
obviously. Yeah. But if it's just to read a screenplay and get a sense of what it's about, you know, I just you don't read, especially if it's like lots of black text, you know, lots of big chunks of paragraphs. So sort of like, okay, we're hospital. Okay, well, what's Miriam saying?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Like,
that's
and this
kind
is
of
good,
it.
and this comes down to, you know, good storytelling. If you are really, there's a Kurt Vonnegut quote which I love, I say it all the time, is his writing advice is, if you have a single sentence that isn't revealing character or moving the plot forward, cut that sentence.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, if you're doing that, your script is hard to skip because it's interesting and you want to know what happens next. And like the scene description matters. Like I remember when I read the spec script for The Quiet Place, I read every word of that because every word really mattered, because they really were intentional. It was also a short script. It was like 80 pages or whatever. Every word mattered and like was interesting, and I was like glued to it. Most people write to fill up space. They elongate moments that should be. People write big, right? There's another piece of advice Avi really offers, which I love, is the framing of, which is, imagine you're giving yourself $100 for every single word that you cut in your script.
Yeah.
Make it skim proof, you know?
Yeah, it's sort of, was it Hemingway who said, like, I'm gonna lie and say it was Hemingway who said, like, I sent you a long letter because I didn't have time to send you a short one. That kind of a thing. I think that's true.
That is Hemingway, actually. That is Hemingway.
Yeah. Whew, I did it. that my lack of high school literature is coming in clutch. So I think that, keep it tight. And if you want people to read your scene description because you think it's really, really good, then make sure that it's all really, really important. Or else you're going to lose their trust and they're going to shift to your dialogue and then they're going to give up. So just something to kind of think about. And I think I mean, that's mostly what I wanted to talk about for screenplay contests. Is sort of so is yeah, is to recap. Basically, if you're thinking about entering a contest, you don't need to have a whole bucket of scripts ready to go. You just need to have one that you feel communicates your intention well and that you feel reasonably good about. You need to be in a position where you will be able to submit it and move on with your life, not obsess about it. You need to be able to submit it and move on. Do a quick pass through your script to increase your chances of success, where you're really focusing on readability, where you're really focusing on, okay, is there anything I can do about this to make sure that my first few pages dive straight into the action, where you understand who these people are or what the story is, or ideally both. Can I make sure that I'm using my white space well? I've bolded my headings. I'm, got really snappy, good dialogue. And then choose the contest that you want to enter. Two that are always strong are Austin and Nichols, but there are some other great ones out there. And in fact, one that I'd love to share with you all that we are going to talk more about later this month is a new one through this company called Keenalign. And we had the fortune of actually talking with Keenalign. And what's really cool about this contest is that it is free to enter. And they are producing the winner for up to $15 million. So I'm going to drop that link in the description and I'll drop it in the chat. But it's a really cool contest, and we are going to have the folks from Keenalign on the podcast, on our live stream in the next couple of weeks to talk more about like what they're looking for. But if you have a feature, it is free to enter, and
just read the small print always, and make sure you're
always read the
comfortable.
small print. Yeah.
But the idea is they're a production company that is creating this screenwriting competition to find content that is, untapped potential, because they're always the same scripts going around in,
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of neat. It's like a competition, but also kind of like an open submission to their production company. So look into it, see if you want to apply, but that's a free one that is also good. But so choose the contest you want to enter, make sure that it's a good fit for you, read the fine print, and submit and move on. I think is my overall piece of advice. So yeah, I think that's it for today. I just wanted to say, make sure that you please subscribe to the channel. You don't want to miss our next live recording. We're going to be back every single Friday. And like I said, we're soon going to have Keenalign on. This month in particular, we're going to be focusing on helping you to get your scripts ready for competitions. So that's going to be looking at things like producibility, marketability. It's going to be looking at things like readability. And in addition to these live talks, we also do a lot of free stuff to help writers write more. Every Sunday on our Discord, which you can find a link to in the description, Theo runs a write-in at 10 a.m. Eastern, where you just show up and you write for an hour. You talk about your writing, you meet with other writers, totally free to attend. We also have 2 free courses, writing the scene and writing the short, which are step-by-step guides basically to writing a strong scene or writing a strong short film. And the one thing that I will promote that is a paid opportunity is that we're also doing a spring writing lab, which I will post the link to. That is basically a writer's group where for $100 you can come to 10 sessions. 10 weekly sessions where we are going to be working on kind of like a Zoom Google Meet screen where we can all kind of meet face to face, and you can hang out with other writers and submit your work and come back week to week and have accountability, get feedback, see progress in your stuff. So we are super excited about that. There's only a couple spots left there. So I will drop that link there. And
it's huge value with I will say, these labs we've been doing, we've really gotten good at doing them. And Alexie and Theo, Carl they're really, 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 really good at giving specific attention to your project at a conceptual level, at an execution level, through the polish level too. Like, we really want to see people's work develop into pages that work, and we want to make sure that there's alignment between the concept working and being solid and well thought out, and strong pages. And I think that's something that this lab does really well, and I strongly recommend.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, so we hope that we'll see you there, and we hope that we will see you next week. Thank you so much, everybody. Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this live recording. We have a couple seconds to take any Q&A questions, just hanging out afterwards, and then we got to head out. But we have a quick question from Maxim. What are some good competitions for shorts? I recently applied to the Coverfly one. Is that a good one? Adam said that's very good. There aren't many. I know that Austin now does shorts as well. That might be something to look into, but I think that Austin, you actually have to have made it for that one. But they also now have a competition for fiction podcast scripts and for digital series and stuff, like scripted digital series. So if you have like a short script that is, I think the range is something like 10 to 30 pages, that could potentially become a series or an anthology or something. Austin could be a potential avenue for that if you entered it into the scripted digital series category or something like that. That's a big one, but it's hard to find contests for short film scripts, I will say. Jim said Slam Dance does shorts. A lot of basically everywhere will take short films if you actually made it, but the scripts themselves are tough. You
should make short films at whatever level you can. And I think more screenwriters should feel empowered to get into directing and to make your own thing, because it's the only time you're really going to have control over the story. Because in screenwriting, the director will rewrite you. And then the editor will rewrite you again. Which is kind of disempowering.
Yeah,
you can cut that bit. We'll make the podcast. No,
nothing after the music makes after the music run makes the podcast. So this is where we can all just share our real opinions. But no, I think that was. Did we miss any other questions during the live stream? We always want to make sure
as we're going along.
Any contest in Europe?
Right? Yeah, so this is just England, but BBC Writers Room has an awesome program tries to it's fellowship opportunities to develop people, but I think that might just be the UK. I'm trying to look. Rain Dance used to have screenwriting stuff, and that's in the UK. They're pretty legit. Again, I just know the UK. Sorry.
Yeah, well, this said it was international. Here's a list from Movie Bites that claims is their international list, but I can't guarantee it. I literally just found it, and some of them I don't know if they're actually. It'd be worth checking out this list. This has some scripts on it that are allegedly international. I don't know if do you have to be American to do like Nichols and stuff like that? You might.
I'd look into that. I don't think so.
I didn't think you had to be, but I guess we can try to examine that. Um, and then the one other point that I wanted to bring up is that when Preston was asking about the few solid scripts before entering or just one, he also said, I guess it probably depends on the contest. Sundance might be worth entering with one if you get to enter their lab and learn more. What I will say about Sundance is that it is certainly presented in a way like where it's like, oh, it's like a lab for like helping you grow. It's really a lab for people who are already on their way to some degree, not necessarily like fully established, but the people who win in Sundance, Adam, you and I were speaking about this, and maybe you have more to say, but the people who win Sundance have somewhat of a track record. It's not that they've been like produced by Warner Brothers and things like that, but a lot of times they have at least made shorts that have run in festivals. Sometimes they have even independently produced a feature. It's like it's more for people who are kind of going rather
It's
than
for
starting.
filmmakers who are on the rise. It's like for
Yeah,
people who are getting their teeth, who are like kind of ready for the next step. And I just looked it up. Austin and Nichols is international. You can
sweet.
you do not have to be U.S. citizen.
Good. Those are fun ones. And those are the two contests where I know personally that like I have gotten traction from placing in semifinals, and Avi got traction from placing. I think he started getting traction at the semifinal level, and then I think he still made it to finals and got even more traction at that point. But what's nice, the reason why I like those so much is that for a lot of the other contests, you don't necessarily get traction just for moving up the ranks. You
That's
get
right.
traction if you win, but at Austin and Nichols, you can get to the semifinal level and get a little bit of something. Like it's still
Right.
prestigious enough that you can say I was a semifinalist here, and that means something. Um,
Like people in screenwriting Twitter, RIP, used to just sort of put that in their bios, like how far they got in Nichols. Like that was that noteworthy of a sort of. And people would even in cold queries would like put it in the subject line, Nichols finalist,
yeah,
Nichols Coder finalist, just to like sort through people's emails. And it means right now it means something. It meant something 5 years ago. It might not mean something 10 years from now. Who knows? But there's these metrics of value and prestige are always changing. Nichols didn't even exist 40 years ago. Like there wasn't really such thing as screenwriting competitions the way there is now. That was really an invention of the 90s and 2000s. Um, who knows how it'll evolve?
yeah. I do think though that Keen Lime is something very, very exciting that I would recommend
It's
looking
interesting.
into and deciding if you want to enter it yourself. We met with the people who worked there, and I'm super excited to have them on to talk about kind of the stuff they're looking for and like what
I
they're
hope they
trying to
succeed.
do. I hope so too. They're
Typical model.
very, yeah, the people who are running it are extremely passionate about screenwriters and screenwriting, and it's going to kind of depend on a lot of different factors, but like how good are the scripts that they get? So if you have a good script, consider it so that they can keep doing this. But it's cool. I think
All right.
I think that's all of our questions. So we will see you all next week. Thanks for hanging out with us. Bye everybody.